Strap yourselves in, kids. This one gets tasty. Shame, innit? Hey! Welcome to the show. Before we get cracking, I would just like to do something that the main star of today's feature seems totally unprepared to do. I'm going to issue an apology, because on the last episode I said ignorant, damaging, harmful things, and I do feel I have to lay my soul bare and say sorry to all of you. Last time I said that Nigel Farage, British politician and hero of the UK Pointer Lager, was the human equivalent of that feeling you get when you remember that you swallow spiders in your sleep. Totally off base, and I couldn't be more sorry. It is a myth that you swallow spiders in your sleep. Nigel Farage comes to your house when you sleep and you accidentally swallow him. Now on with the show. Brash Games. Now, you may or may not have heard of this particular website, and under normal circumstances there'd be nothing interesting to say about it. Owned by Paul Ryan, not that one, brashgames.co.uk is a video game review site that, in its own words, is on a mission to provide the games industry with an opportunity to showcase the various games platforms available at the moment, and to help you find the very best games around whilst steering you clear of the stinkers. It seems to have an audience and is, or at least was, credible enough to be a presence in the industry, get review code from publishers, and appear on score aggregates like Metacritic. Before last week, the most notable thing about it is that it broke the review embargo for Yooka-Laylee to get ahead of the curve. But we're here to talk about how it doesn't pay its writers, and how that's only the tip of this organisation's iceberg. An iceberg made of piss, I should point out. A pissberg. Brash found itself in the spotlight a short while ago when a writer, Ollie Smith, blew the whistle on the company's payment process, or lack thereof, because he wasn't being paid. At all. That's bad enough, but what really made Smith speak out was the fact that when he quit working for the site, Brash almost immediately set about removing his name from all of his work. For those who have struggled in the writing industry, you'll know what the word exposure means. In lieu of paying their writers, many mid-scale sites offer exposure, the chance to get your work seen and your credibility heightened, presumably before moving on to a site that will give them real money. Exposure has long been debunked as a bullshit way of finagling free work out of somebody, but it seems that Brash can't even promise that, since if you leave the site, they'll scrub your by name and credit the work to the site itself. You move on, your entire portfolio goes up in smoke, and no exposure, fuck you. Thanks, Paul Ryan. Not that one. Yeah, but somehow it gets worse. Another writer, Josh Robertson, revealed Brash Games will change review scores without so much as warning the reviewer. When Robertson gave Toy Odyssey a 3 out of 10, Brash told him his score didn't line up with a previous review of Toy Odyssey, because apparently Brash will review a game twice? Why is this company? Is this a real business? Or is it like that old Marzio's pizza chain, because that was shit? Robertson eventually bumped the score up to 4, but when it was finally published, Brash Games had added another point for shits and giggles. In Robertson's words, it was a case of, your score doesn't match up with everyone else's, so they just changed it without telling him. And his story is one of several to have surfaced since. Review aggregate OpenCritic launched an investigation into Brash Games to chase up allegations of surreptitious score changes and other shady behaviour. The full report is publicly available, but to give you the short version of it now, OpenCritic no longer lists Brash Games among its outlets because it can't be trusted. Funnily enough, Brash is listed as out of business on other review aggregates now, and was removed from internet archives so nobody could find old articles and get evidence of altered scores. What Paul Ryan, not that one, didn't know is that OpenCritic archives every review it posts, and so had its own snapshot evidence of tampering. Ha 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 ha. However, it wasn't until a review for Pac-Man 256 that things really got kicked the fuck up. See, because Brash Games doesn't bother with giving its writers feedback or checking over the work for errors or editing issues, apparently you can lace a review with specific and vicious slaggings off aimed at the very publication publishing it, which is exactly what Ben McCurry did with his review of Pac-Man 256, if I may read you a glorious excerpt. Complementing the brilliant reimagined gameplay is a fantastic soundtrack. Namco Bandai shy away from the sound of silence, which is, at the time of writing, exactly what I received when I announced my resignation to the editor Paul Ryan and clarified I would leave Brash as soon as possible. No email, no apology, no I wish you the best in your future endeavours, nothing. Pure radio silence. The only acknowledgements I received was that my name was pulled from the contributors list quietly. Some might call that cowardly. I'll leave it to your interpretation. Rather, the game exploits low-key techno beats to gracefully update the beloved musical stings and background tracks. And, I promise this is the last time I utilise this painful segue, speaking of exploitation, Brash Games took advantage of naive young writers, offering them no money but exposure, which is useless when you essentially pretend your writers did not exist later on down the line. Ben gave the game a 1 out of 10, not because he disliked it, but because he knew Paul Ryan, not that one, would change the score to fit what he wanted anyway, so why fucking bother? In terms of going out with a bang, that's impressive. In fact, it's so impressive I think Ben McCurry deserves real exposure with real compensation. So that's what I gave him. Ben was commissioned to write a piece about Brash for the Jimquisition.com for a competitive fee, and I will be delighted to hear his pitches for freelance work in future. You can read that article right now if you want. It's called Why Brash Games Should Apologise, because hey, if you're going to produce a video shitting all over another game's media outlet, you might as well show them up even further by paying their former contributors to work for you. Also, I did it because I can. The well goes even deeper than this, though. See, one of the major problems about running an operation where you don't pay your staff and make pariahs of them if they dare leave you is that it doesn't inspire a lot of loyalty. In fact, when it became clear that I was working on a piece about Brash, you won't believe the amount of information that was flung my way from former associates eager to see Paul Ryan, not that one, get pilloried for what it turns out is over a decade of this sort of shit. The emails I've been given document Ryan's original outfit, Ace Games, a site he says he lost £22,000 trying to turn into a viable business and eventually sold to a man called Matt. I'm not going to go over all the details here because much of it is boring and the interesting stuff will make you embarrassed for the people involved, but to talk broad strokes, Ace Games also didn't pay its staff and also removed bylines from editors if they quit. Ace Games was sold in 2010, which means Paul Ryan, not that one, has been pulling shit like this for at least 6 years. And he says he ran Ace Games for a whole 10 years before then, so like, fuck. In one email, Paul announces the sudden sale of and his immediate non-involvement with Ace Games. The site went to that man I mentioned called Matt. Simply Matt, who represented a company called Splash Bubble, and if I have to tell you not to bother looking for evidence of Splash Bubble's existence, you must be new here. Anyway, what developed after was a weird sort of lover's spat between Paul, Matt, and Paul's second-in-command, someone called Jeff. Following the bizarre, increasingly meltdown emails from those involved is difficult, but as far as I can tell, and as best as my sources can describe from 6 years back, the staff of Ace Games were essentially treated like children in the middle of a really messy divorce, with Paul and Jeff going to writers, both publicly and privately, to slag each other off and look for support on what must be the shittest Game of Thrones episode ever. In the middle of it all is this mysterious benefactor Matt potentially playing both sides, and oh fucking hell, let's just leave it at that. Short story is, Paul Ryan, not that one, has a long history of unprofessional behaviour and inability to treat his staff with courtesy, and none of this ugly shit I just threw up like a gossiper would have seen the light of day if Ryan had endeared himself a little bit to anybody unfortunate enough to work for him. Oh, and the story doesn't stop there. This fella right here is Kirioth, who noticed something very strange about Brash Games, a site that promises an ad-free experience to its users. What do you got for us, Kirioth? I did say that right, didn't I?
I got confused when I noticed a particular name crop up attached to a certain tag. The gambling tag. Why it's turning up on a site that focuses primarily on reviews is a bit strange, a bit puzzling. When you look at the gambling tag, and you go to the category of gambling, and you see one name, David James.
This David James, nobody seems to know who he is, and there's no evidence he's ever written anything that doesn't link to a third-party gambling website, such as this list of must-have PC games that inexplicably contains a glorified ad for a random roulette game found on the gambling site Mr. Casino. And every single Brash post using the gambling tag is both written by this mysterious David and contains some contrived excuse to link to a third-party gambling site. Evidence of undisclosed paid content? Not quite evidence, because there's no proof of money changing hands. However, it's behaviour bordering on the bizarre. And if it hasn't been done for money, David James might just have a very real gambling problem that he needs to seek help for, if he's a real person. All I'll say is that when you search for David James, you get the famous footballer, and Ryan is a big football fan, if his old defunct email address, paulryan@mancityfans.com, is anything to go by.
BULLSHIT. New word. ARTIST. Spells bullshit artist. I say again, bullshit artist.
It's also worth noting that, gambler or not, David James is now listed as the owner and copyright holder for Brash Games, not Paul. The terms and conditions page did once list Paul, but after people started digging into the company, Mr. James suddenly ran the show. Is David just an alter ego of Paul, or the real owner? Who the fuck knows? Everything about Brash is off and wrong and fucking weird. Hi, sorry to interrupt myself, but developments have happened. This is a story that won't stop happening. In fact, I have more information about Brash than I know what to do with, more than will fit into the show. But an interesting thing happened over the weekend. It's actually Monday morning as I film this right now. Over the weekend I published Ben McCurry's article, and when it became clear that I was not fucking around when it came to this Brash situation, Paul Ryan, not that one, went about burning evidence, just trying to hide all of the skullduggery and shady doings. So this David James isn't David James anymore. David James's name has been changed to Useless Ranger, for all the good that does. Also, on that About page where it says that David James is the copyright holder, the owner of Brash Games, that's gone. It's no longer credited to Paul or David James, it just says it's credited to Brash Games and several named individuals who are not named. These key named individuals are just, like, we assume it's Paul and David, if they are two different people. I mean, we've got all the evidence already. We've got the screenshots. OpenCritic had the screenshots. I've got the screenshots. Kiriat's got the screenshots. You're not good at this, Paul. And I think that's part of what's so insulting about this, is because you exploit young talented writers. I mean, McCurry is evidence of talent that you've been basically leeching off of. And I just think that the next generation of games media deserves a better class of parasite than you. Fuck your fucking ideas up. Back to the show. And if you want to further deepen the connection between Brash and online gambling, be aware that one of Brash Games' writers is Stan Rogers, the man behind gambling website freeslotmoney.com. Here's David James linking to freeslotmoney.com in an article. How fortunate for them. Why is it listing all these game publishers as clients? What does that word mean in this context? Did they just rip Nintendo's list of third-party Switch They did! What the fuck? It's unlikely we'll get answers from Paul Ryan, not that one, or the mysterious David James anytime soon, at least not if this other leaked email is to be believed. I'll quote the relevant portion, the words of Mr. Ryan himself. I have decided not to read any of this crap and have not made any statements and don't intend to. Oh. I suppose that's one way to deal with a situation, just ignore it. For the record, I have reached out to Brash for comment, and I'll let you know if indeed Ryan changes his mind and makes a statement about any of this quote-unquote crap. So to summarise, Brash doesn't pay its writers. Brash scrubs the bylines of anybody who quits, retroactively plagiarising the work by crediting it to Ryan and Brash Games. Brash doesn't edit or check articles and doesn't communicate with its staff. Brash changes review scores without telling the reviewers. Brash owner Paul Ryan has a long history of unprofessional behaviour and treating colleagues like shit. Brash has a fondness for gambling websites bordering on the fucking weird. I know I missed some of it, but that's the cliff notes. They're the important bits. Now, for the worst part of it all. Brash Games might be a coalition of extremities, but individual examples of its behaviour are not, sadly, out of the ordinary. Hell, a few years back while I was still at Destructoid, they once quite publicly brought on a group of unpaid interns to produce content for the site, and it was no cooler then than it is now. For a long time, however, it was seen as quite normal to work for exposure in games media, but the times they are a-changing, and the tolerance for this bullshit is at an all-time low, especially when blogs are no longer the only and best way to get a foot in the door. So let me say this right now to anybody who wants to write game reviews, news, editorials, whatever. If you're working for a site that's not paying you, leave it. Right now. Immediately. If a site can't afford to pay you, it doesn't have the credibility needed to give you the exposure you're being promised. In fact, you'd be better off starting your own YouTube channel or your own blog and going it alone for all the help companies like Brash will fucking provide. Build your brand. Your own name. Use whatever outlet you have and make it work for you, not the other way around. Do not ever bust your ass trying to make a name for a website because they sure as shit won't make a name for you. Hell, that last part's true even if you are being paid. You could be laid off any second and you'll have only the brand you built for yourself, not the brand you built for the company to trade on. You want to be a success in games media? Get in, get known, get the fuck out. And never trust them. Don't trust a single one of them. Who is the them I'm referring to? Doesn't matter. It's whoever is telling you right now they're going to take care of you, and the best days of your career starts with them, and your job working for them is the best job ever. By all means like them, by all means work for them with all the joy in your heart, but never, for a second, ever, ever, ever trust that fucking cunt.
Bullshit artist!
And that's the tale of Brash Games and Paul Ryan, a B-U-L-L-S-H-I-T, new word, A-R-T-I-S-T, bullshit artist. And I really do mean what I said with that last bit. Like, if you take nothing away from this episode, just that last bit is important. That message to new writers, new people who want to get into games media, okay? Don't let fuckheads pull the wool over your eyes, alright? And you work on you. You don't work on them. Thank God for me, okay? That bit you've got to do regardless of anything else, the thanking God for me. It's actually a requirement for getting into games media. If nobody told you, thank God for me, alright? And fuck Paul Ryan. Not that one. Actually, that one as well. What's that coming over the hill? Is it a monster? Is it a monster? No, it's Fuck Konami news. All the news that's fit to make you say Fuck Konami. We were going to do this one last week, but the batteries ran out on my microphone, so I couldn't do it. But I'm doing it this week. There's a new Castlevania game. Oh yes, let's look at a trailer. Yeah, it's another pachinko machine. I mean, no big breaking news there. Konami's doing another pachinko machine that just pisses all over one of its popular game franchises. It's just especially funny that Castlevania's 30th anniversary came and went, and I believe Konami's European Twitter account is the only official means of recognition there. I think they were the only people that actually acknowledged that one of the company's most endearing franchises had its 30th fucking anniversary. But don't worry, this is a good tribute. We'll ignore 3 decades of a cult classic. But we'll have the pachinko ready for you, don't worry about that. So, pachinko, Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, long story short, fuck Konami, thank you.